I have to preface this entire video by saying I am the furthest thing from an expert on Call of Duty World War II, and I'm also probably the least qualified person to give my opinion on Call of Duty World War II Zombies mode. That being said, I'm going to do exactly that, because I've already talked about almost all of Treyarch's mainline entries in the game, and now I want to talk about some of the ones that don't fall under the Treyarch umbrella, some of the attempts to mimic the original Zombies mode and make their own unique thing from the other developers responsible for other mainline Call of Duty games, this time being Sledgehammer. Now for context, I primarily play Call of Duty for zombies. That's how it's been since World at War. That's what keeps bringing me back to the franchise, and that's what's drained $60 to $80 every year for the past 18 years out of my wallet. If your Call of Duty game has a zombies mode in it, I'm buying it and I'm playing it. But Call of Duty World War II was the first game in a long time that almost flipped the script for me. Now a bit of background about the game. Call of Duty World War II was the first game in a long time that finally brought us back to a true, gritty, boots on the ground, non-futuristic warfare game. Before World War II, we had Infinite Warfare, Black Ops 3, Advanced Warfare, Ghosts, Black Ops 2, and Modern Warfare 3, all entries that were either slightly postmodern or entirely futuristic, before you finally get all the way back to 2010's Black Ops 1 for a Call of Duty game based in history and not in fantasy. So if you've lost track, that's 7 years of futuristic, goofy, experimental Call of Duty games. And of course, multiple entries in that time were absolutely phenomenal. This is not a hate video on futuristic COD games, as much as that topic's been drawn out a million times over on this platform. This is an acknowledgement that for the first time since World at War, Call of Duty was going back to World War II, an almost 10-year gap, and we finally get to see another studio take a crack at a dark, horrifying take on the COD franchise. Fans of the franchise were ecstatic. The game was literally being grounded and brought back to reality for the first time in a decade. And of course, the thing that drew me in, this game had zombies. For someone like me who absolutely loved World at War and was really excited at the prospect that we might get a true, gritty, dark take on zombies for the first time in a decade, this game was shaping up to be great. Massive community engagement, a ton of hype built around it, with a promise to bring Call of Duty back to its old form. But there's a key word there. It was only shaping up to be great. And for me, that's about where the excitement ended. World War II Zombies wasn't bad, but it wasn't great either. World War II kicked things off with its launch map, the Final Reich, a snowy German village with underground research bunkers, gruesome, bloody eldritch beasts to fight, and in my opinion, a fairly interesting cast of characters to kick off a new storyline. So far, so good. This game mode played well, it was visually appealing, the storyline was interesting as a follow-up but unique to itself from what Treyarch had been working on, and most of the gameplay mechanics were very familiar and not trying to outwardly change what we already knew about this mode from other developers' own attempts at COD Zombies. All on paper great things that were shaping up to be a really solid entry in the franchise. But again, that's about where the excitement stopped for me, and honestly I think that's where it stopped too for a lot of other folks in the community. Even though there was a lot of great things on paper, there was a lot drawing it back. This version of Zombies was immensely difficult. Yeah, it implemented a lot of great quality of life features and interesting perks, armor system, good progression, but it also lacked the ability to be played casually. A fair trade-off if you want to make something truly challenging, but not a great trade-off when you want something replayable and mindless like past entries in the COD Zombies series. Not saying that every entry in the game mode needs to be a mindless and easy slop fest, but at the same time, if you want folks to be able to go back to it and be able to enjoy it as a replayable mode, you have to make it at least somewhat approachable for the casual player. And World War II Zombie mode was not that at launch. And this is where I want to say my absolutely honest take. I think World War II was a really, really cool entry from Sledgehammer into the broad world of different zombies modes. Of course, my favorite take on zombies is Treyarch's throughout the Black Ops series, but I'm a big fan of what Infinity Ward did with Infinite Warfare. I think Exo Zombies was a neat, albeit very different approach to the mode. Being different isn't a bad thing, and I was truly excited for what Sledgehammer were cooking up with World War II. It was delivering everything I wanted a non-Treyarch Zombies mode to be. Dark, gritty, difficult, challenging, interesting Easter eggs, visually appealing, well-designed maps. It had nearly everything I wanted it to have, but it just didn't hook me the way that the other games did. Maybe I could blame that on post-launch content, maybe I could blame it on the game that it was attached to, but even then I enjoyed the multiplayer and the campaign of Call of Duty World War II. This is a well-rounded entire entry in the COD franchise. Why wasn't I hooked on World War II Zombies? To this day, I still really can't figure it out. Ultimately, looking back on it, I think a lot of it boils down to the fact that it was one of the first COD games where I did truly enjoy every other mode in it. A controversial take, I'm sure, that I enjoyed multiplayer and campaign in this game, but there was something about finally returning to a slower-paced, boots-on-the-ground World War II era COD game that made me actually want to engage with the whole thing. I wasn't much of a movement person myself. I wasn't big on YY spamming, ladder stalling, max sensitivity, flick-shotting, hyper-competitive multiplayer modes featured in the past few COD games, and ultimately it's why I don't touch multiplayer at all these days. It's just not for me, and that's fine. But for some reason, for the first time in a COD entry in a long time, World War II Zombies just didn't get my attention the way I wanted it to. And don't get get me wrong, the first map was awesome. It was really fun. I've gone back to it a handful of times in the past 8 years since the game launched, and I look back on it pretty fondly, but post-launch content didn't grip me. The storyline really didn't hook with me past the first map. The game mode itself was too difficult for me to want to go back to play casually, and that's coming from someone who thrives on making the game more challenging and loves high rounding and speedrunning Easter eggs, doing starting room challenges. And weirdly enough, I don't like that the newer games in the Black Ops series have become overly casual friendly. I think there's a healthy balance you can strike between casual friendly and challenging, and this game just didn't find that balance. This might be something a little weird to say, but I almost think that Sledgehammer tried listening to the community too much in response to the backlash that the past couple of COD games got. Every time they tried to take a risk, they backpedaled on it. They made a map too difficult, they followed it up with something way too easy. They made a map too complicated, they trailed it back with something way too simple. World War II's post-launch content was way too hot and cold. It didn't build its own identity, it didn't stick to its own guns. It has some of the worst maps ever featured in a Call of Duty Zombies entry, and some really fun ones that are standout but maybe a little too casual friendly. I think it needed to pick a lane and stick to it. If you want to be the dark and gritty horror entry in the Zombies franchise, be it. If you want to be an easier and more casual friendly entry, be it. But if you try to be both and you're not appealing to either side of the audience, you're not going to make a solid impression or a lasting impression on anybody in the fan base. And I think across the community this same sentiment holds. I don't think this is a unique opinion on Call of Duty World War II. Most folks really did enjoy the launch of World War II Zombies. It was a neat Zombies game. It implemented a ton of cool new features and quality of life adjustments, but post-launch it completely lacked continued community engagement. A community member posted a few months ago asking folks their opinion on the game now about a decade later, and nearly every reply agrees. The storyline started strong and trailed off a very steep cliff post-launch. DLC maps are a mixed bag of beautiful and fun to downright terrible. Sometimes fun, sometimes challenging, sometimes so frustratingly difficult even the most hardcore fans have no interest in going back to it more than a single time just to say they've done it. Some that are so easy they're mindless and they have no point in replaying because there's zero challenge to them. So all that to say, World War II Zombies was almost great. It had a lot of great things going for it on paper, and I truly do think it was another swing and a miss by a developer trying to dip their toes into Treyarch's already immensely successful pool and getting eaten alive by a community extremely opposed to change, and unfortunately not delivering post-launch what could have been on its own a top-tier entry in the franchise. And not every developer has to try and meet the same expectations that Treyarch built. They can build their own unique entry in the series that can stand out on its own if done right. And that brings up a very valid point that I think is worth acknowledging. Sledgehammer were given the opportunity to continue the storyline of World War II. They were given an additional World War II based Call of Duty game in Call of Duty Vanguard, something that I think is a massive advantage to proving that the thing you built first time around was worth building, and that the community should re-engage with it the second time around because you're committed to continuing something that you're willing to stand on. An opportunity that I think if Infinity Ward were given with a game like Infinite Warfare could have sent their Zombies entry out as one of the best in the entire series. But Sledgehammer didn't take that opportunity. They completely fumbled the bag with Call of Duty Vanguard and another attempt at the World War II Zombies mode. They didn't take the effort or the confidence in putting a second entry in the World War II Zombies storyline, and unfortunately because of that squandered any possibility of redeeming World War II. And what the community ended up getting delivered in Call of Duty Vanguard was not the sequel to World War II Zombies that it should have been. It was a terrible mess worthy of its own video acknowledging what an awful entry in the series it is. More on that in another video, keep an eye out for that. But what we're left with is World War II Zombies on its own as a mostly forgotten entry in the COD franchise, and a Zombies mode that had so much potential to be more, but just could not deliver on being as great as we all hoped it could have been. Now maybe I'm being too harsh on Call of Duty World War II. Do you agree that it was a bit of a letdown and had so much more potential to be great? Or does this game rank on the top of your list of non-Treyarch Zombies modes? Let me know your thoughts. And if you like this style of commentary and you want to see me do more of these retrospective style videos, drop me a like and a comment. That's all I've got for now, and I'll see you in the next one.